My name is Cassidy Webb, and the night my son was born was nothing like I imagined. The room was cold, the lights dimmed to a sterile glow, and the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside me. I was trembling from the anesthesia when I reached for my phone. My hands shook as I typed, "Please someone bring me a blanket or help me feed him." Then I waited, watching the screen light up my face in the darkness. No one replied. Not a single message. The nurses were busy, the hallway silent. I kept staring at that tiny green bubble, half hoping someone in my family would remember I existed. Hours passed and the glow of the monitor became the only heartbeat in the room. When morning came, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. Out of habit, I opened social media. The first post that appeared was from my sister. A wide shot of a backyard grill, sunlight on her face. My parents beside her plates full of food, the caption reading, "Family time, best weekend ever." My fingers went numb. They knew I was here recovering from surgery holding a newborn alone. And yet, they were smiling for pictures, while I lay under fluorescent lights trying to stop shivering. That photo stayed on my screen far longer than it should have. If you have ever felt invisible to the very people you trusted most, stay with me until the end. What happened next is something I never thought I would live to tell, and it still doesn't feel real. 2 days after the surgery, the fog of medicine began to fade, and the silence that replaced it felt heavier than the pain in my stitches. I kept thinking about Ethan, my husband, who never got to see our son take his first breath. He was a police officer in Springfield, killed during a domestic disturbance call 7 months ago. I remembered the knock on the door, the folded flag, the way the room went cold, as his partner said the words no one should ever have to hear. For weeks I had replayed that moment in my mind, hoping it would hurt less each time, but it never did. Before he died, Ethan used to say that no matter what happened, family would always show up. I believed that, especially when my mother Elaine promised she would be there for me through everything. Those words used to feel like a safety net. Now they felt like a lie echoing in an empty room. Mrs. Peterson, my elderly neighbor, was the only person who showed up without being asked. She knocked softly on the hospital door, holding a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon bread. She told me she remembered when I was a little girl chasing fireflies in her yard. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. When she left, I was alone again, staring at the same white walls and wondering how something as loud as birth could leave behind so much quiet. That night, I opened the family group chat again. I typed another message asking if anyone could come for a few minutes just to help me hold the baby so I could rest. The small check marks appeared beside each name one by one, confirming they had read it. Then nothing. No reply. No call. Not even an emoji. The screen stayed blank, and my reflection stared back at me from the glass. 3 days later, my sister Lydia finally answered. Her message said, "We were busy. You'll be fine." Those words stung more than silence ever could. I realized there were distances in life that no car, no apology, no shared blood could cross. I looked out the window of the recovery room, where rain streaked the glass like smoke trails in a storm. Somewhere far away, the world kept moving, but inside that room, everything had stopped. 2 weeks passed quietly in the small apartment, the kind of quiet that hummed between the sound of the refrigerator and the baby's faint breathing. The walls were bare, except for a small framed photo of Ethan Webb holding his police badge with that easy grin he always had. Every night before I went to sleep, I told our son that his father was brave, that he kept the city safe, that he loved him more than life itself. Some nights I believed the words, and some nights they felt like stories I was telling to comfort both of us. That afternoon, sunlight slipped through the blinds while I was warming a bottle. The phone on the counter buzzed again and again, shaking slightly against the surface. I picked it up with one hand still holding the bottle with the other. The screen was full of missed calls and a new message from Mom. Her words were short and sharp. "We need $3,000 right now." For a moment I thought I had read it wrong. I stared at the number, then the timestamp, then the typing bubble that appeared and disappeared before the next message came. Your father is having some trouble with the bank. We'll pay you back soon. The words blurred together. I set the bottle down, felt my pulse rising as the baby began to fuss in his crib. The tone in Mom's text wasn't a request. It felt like a command, something she had already decided I would do. I called her. The line rang twice before she answered, her voice calm in a way that made my stomach twist. We just need a little help, Cassidy. It's nothing serious. I asked what had happened. She said there were mistakes in an account, something about a delayed payment, a small problem. But when I asked why she needed exactly $3,000, her voice hardened. Don't question everything. Just do it if you can. The conversation ended with static. I stood there, feeling the room close in. I opened my banking app. The balance looked lower than I remembered. I scrolled down, scanning the transactions. My breath caught when I saw a recent charge for a large transfer I hadn't made. The destination was an online payment service based in another city. I double-checked the details. It wasn't a withdrawal error. It was an authorization under my name. The transaction ID looked unfamiliar, but the connected email address ended with the same domain Mom used for her online bills. My hands felt cold. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, that maybe it was a glitch or a delay in the system. I wanted to believe that, but deep down, I already knew it wasn't. I sent a short text asking if she or Dad had used my account for something. The message was marked as read instantly. No answer. A minute later, another notification appeared on my phone. It was a deposit alert from a local utility company confirming a payment made from my account for an address that wasn't mine. I picked up the phone again but didn't call. I just stared at the name on the screen, the contact that said, Mom. Something inside me cracked open, not loud but steady, like the slow tear of paper. I thought about all the promises she had made when Ethan died, the way she had held my shoulders and said, You're not alone. The baby cried again, pulling me back to the present. I lifted him, his small weight pressing against my chest, the warmth of his body grounding me as my thoughts tangled in panic and disbelief. I walked to the window, needing air. Outside, cars moved along the wet street, their reflections stretching across the pavement in long streaks of light. Inside, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom appeared. Did you send it yet? We can't wait much longer. I turned the screen face down on the table and let the silence take over. The bottle sat forgotten beside it, milk cooling slowly while my son fell asleep in my arms. His breath was steady and innocent, untouched by the chaos outside our small apartment. I pressed my lips against his forehead and whispered, It's going to be okay. But even as I said it, my eyes drifted to the phone, and the question I didn't dare say aloud echoed inside me like a whisper. Could my own family do this? 3 days later, the air in the apartment carried a faint smell of powdered milk and detergent. The baby slept in the bassinet beside the couch while I sat on the floor surrounded by crumpled envelopes and half-open bills. My thoughts kept circling around the missing money, the unanswered messages, and the uneasy feeling that none of it was random. I decided to call the bank. The representative's voice was polite but cautious. She asked me to verify my name, address, and the last 4 digits of my Social Security number. When she placed me on hold, the line filled with faint instrumental music that seemed to stretch for minutes. Finally, she returned. Mrs. Webb, we have an active credit account under your name ending in 1426. Is that what you're calling about? I froze. I had never applied for any credit card since Ethan died. Can you tell me when that account was opened? I asked. It was issued 3 months ago, she said, with a co-applicant named Elaine Webb. For a few seconds I couldn't speak. The name echoed in my head, each syllable scraping like glass. I managed to ask for the mailing address attached to the card. It was my parents' house. After hanging up, I stared at the muted TV, unable to process what I had just heard. Then, like a slide clicking into place, I remembered the afternoon Mom came by holding a stack of papers and smiling. She said she needed a photocopy of my ID to complete some insurance forms for the baby. I had handed it to her without hesitation. At that time, I was too tired to think, too eager to believe that someone still cared enough to help. Now the memory felt like betrayal disguised as kindness. I scrolled through old text messages and found her casual words from that day. "Don't worry, it's just paperwork." I read them twice before locking the screen. I dialed her number. She answered after a long pause, her voice careful, almost wary. "Cassidy, what's going on?" I told her everything the bank had said. There was a silence that lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she laughed softly. "You're imagining things. It's probably a mistake in the system. You need to rest." Her tone carried the same calm condescension that always made me feel small. I tried to stay steady. "Mom, they said your name was on it. You used my ID." Another pause. "You think I'd steal from my own daughter, Cassidy, really?" The words landed heavy, but before I could respond, another voice joined the line. It was Lydia. "Cass, please. It's not a big deal. It's family money, we're not strangers. Don't make this dramatic." Her casual tone made my hands tremble. "You both used my information without telling me. That's not family, that's fraud." Lydia sighed. "You're overreacting. You've always been too sensitive." The sound of their blended voices filled my ear, calm, dismissive, practiced. It was the same tone they used when I was a child asking questions they didn't want to answer. I realized they had rehearsed this dynamic for years, and I had played my part perfectly quiet, forgiving, hopeful. But not anymore. I hung up before either of them could say another word. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. I logged into every account I owned, bank, utilities, even the online grocery store. I changed every password, every recovery email, every security question. Each confirmation message felt like a tiny act of resistance, a reclaiming of something I hadn't even realized I had lost. The baby stirred in his sleep, letting out a soft sound that melted the tension in my chest. I closed the laptop and walked to the crib. His tiny fingers curled around mine, warm and certain. I watched his chest rise and fall, the rhythm steady and fragile all at once. A knock at the door made me flinch. For a moment, I thought it might be them coming to explain, to twist the story again, until I doubted my own memory. But when I peeked through the peephole, it was only Mrs. Peterson holding a basket of laundry detergent samples she'd picked up at the store. I thanked her, forcing a smile, and she left as quietly as she came. When the door clicked shut, I leaned my forehead against it, letting out a slow breath. The apartment was still, except for the low hum of the heater and the distant sound of rain. My phone lit up on the table with a new message from Mom. "You need to stop overthinking. Family should trust each other." I deleted it without reading the rest. I sat beside the crib, tracing the soft outline of my son's face in the dim light. Everything I had believed about loyalty and family had shifted into something unfamiliar. I whispered to him, my voice steady, though my heart wasn't. "It's just you and me now, buddy." The words filled the room like a quiet promise. Rain had been falling for hours, tapping softly against the windows when I woke to an unfamiliar silence. Something about the night felt wrong, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I got up to check on the baby, then glanced out the living room window toward the driveway. The space where my car should have been was empty. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks in the dim streetlight. I pressed my face closer to the glass, but the spot remained vacant, wet pavement glistening where tires should have cut shadows. My stomach clenched. I had not heard any alarm, no sound of an engine, nothing. I slipped on my coat, stepped outside, and felt the cold rain soak through within seconds. The driveway looked untouched, no signs of forced entry, no broken glass. The keys still hung by the door. I ran back inside and opened the security app on my phone. The playback started, the timestamp flickering around 2 a.m. There, caught in the pale glow of the porch light, was a man walking toward the car with measured steps. He wore a rain jacket, his hood half pulled back. When he turned slightly to look behind him, my breath stopped. Even through the blurry image, I recognized the shape of his face. It was my father, Frank Webb. The footage showed him unlocking the car easily and driving away, taillights fading into the mist. He had not broken in. He had a key. I sat frozen on the couch, phone trembling in my hand, every thought colliding in disbelief. I called the local police department, explained that the car registered under my name had been taken without permission. The officer on the line sounded hesitant. "Ma'am, the vehicle is still registered to you, correct?" I confirmed. He sighed. "That makes it a civil matter, not a theft. If a family member borrowed it, there's not much we can do unless it's reported abandoned or damaged." The words echoed in my head as I thanked him and hung up. By sunrise, the baby was awake. I dressed him quickly, bundled him into the back seat of a rideshare, and headed to my parents' house. The rain had stopped, but the ground shimmered, reflecting the gray morning. When I turned the corner into their street, I saw it before I even reached the driveway. My car was parked in front of their house, its license plates missing streaks of mud along the bumper. My pulse thundered. I stopped at the curb, stepped out, and walked slowly toward the front door. Mom opened it before I could knock. Her expression was calm, almost rehearsed. "Cassidy, you should have called before coming over," she said, adjusting her robe as if she had been expecting a guest, not a confrontation. "Where's Dad?" I asked. She glanced behind her shoulder. "Out back, fixing something." My voice was steady but cold. "I know he took the car." Her eyes flickered briefly, then settled back into that same neutral mask. "What are you talking about?" I stepped past her into the hallway. The smell of coffee and wet wood filled the air. Dad was by the window pretending to clean his tools. He did not look up. "I needed to borrow it," he said finally, his tone flat. "You weren't using it much, and I thought," I cut him off. "You thought what?" "That you could take it in the middle of the night, remove the plates, and no one would notice." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Mom spoke quietly. "Frank was only trying to help with the errands we can't afford right now. Don't make this into something it isn't." I stared at them both, realizing the depth of what had been unraveling all along. It was never about need or misunderstanding. It was about entitlement. Every line between family and betrayal had blurred. They did not even look guilty, just inconvenienced by being caught. I took one slow breath, memorizing the scene: the dripping raincoat by the door, the smell of damp carpet, the faint sound of my son cooing in the carrier behind me. My voice came out low but clear. "This ends here." Neither of them replied. Mom folded her arms. Dad looked down at his hands. I turned, walked out, and closed the door gently behind me. The car sat in the driveway, silent, reflecting the gray sky above. I didn't touch it. Some things once taken, even when returned, are never really yours again. A week passed in a blur of sleepless nights and paperwork. I spent most mornings pacing the living room, trying to calm the baby while thinking of how to fix everything my parents had broken. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside pulled me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw a dark sedan stop by the mailbox. The driver stepped out holding a brown envelope under his arm. It took me a second to recognize him. It was Robert Hale, my mother's older brother. We had not spoken in years. When I opened the door, he gave a polite nod, rain still dripping from his coat. "Cassidy," he said softly, "I hope this isn't a bad time." I gestured for him to come in, still uncertain why he was there. He looked around the small living room, eyes landing briefly on the baby asleep in the swing. His face softened. "He looks just like Ethan," he murmured. That simple sentence made my throat tighten. No one in my family had said Ethan's name since the funeral. Robert sat down and placed the envelope on the table. "Your mother might never forgive me for coming here." He said, his voice careful, but I couldn't stay quiet after what I found. I stared at the envelope, unsure whether I wanted to open it. "What is it?" I asked. He sighed. "Copies of loan applications, all filed under your name. The originals are in your parents' filing cabinet. I made these copies last week after Elaine bragged during dinner that she'd managed to handle a few payments using your credit. She said you'd understand eventually. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the air itself had thickened. I reached for the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were printed pages stamped with the bank's seal, my signature forged, in the same looping handwriting my mother used to sign birthday cards. My stomach turned. "How long has this been going on?" I whispered. Robert looked ashamed. "At least 6 months. She said it started when your father's business hit trouble." I told her it wasn't right, but she laughed and said family sticks together. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. It wasn't relief or anger, but a strange calm. Someone finally believed me. Someone from the inside. Robert must have seen it in my face because his expression softened. "You didn't deserve this, Cass. She always pushed too far, but this..." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I knew I had to bring it to you." I looked at the stack of papers, the numbers, the fake signatures. The betrayal had proof now, tangible and undeniable. My parents could no longer twist the truth into something convenient. I thought of the night my father drove off with my car, of the messages they ignored, of the laughter that probably followed when they thought I would never find out. The anger came slowly this time, not like a storm, but like the steady flame of a candle refusing to die. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for trusting me enough to come here." He nodded. "I'm sorry it took me so long. I didn't want to believe Elaine could do this to her own daughter. But I've seen too much now." He leaned back, his shoulders heavy. "I've already spoken to someone at the financial department. They can investigate once we submit these copies together." We spent the next hour sorting through the documents, labeling each page, preparing a small folder to deliver the next morning. The baby stirred once, and Robert smiled faintly, whispering that Ethan would have been proud. For the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest ease just a little. When he stood to leave, the sky outside had turned pale with early evening light. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Family isn't always blood, Cass," he said gently. "Sometimes it's who stands up for you." He walked back to his car, the sound of gravel fading behind him. I stood by the window long after he was gone, holding the folder close, knowing that this time I wouldn't be fighting alone. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, the financial department completed their review, and the results spread through the small town like wildfire. Elaine and Frank Webb were officially flagged for fraudulent credit activity. Their accounts were frozen, their credit scores destroyed, and the letters from the bank started arriving one after another, each stamped with bold red warnings. I never celebrated. I only watched from my small apartment as the fallout unfolded piece by piece, the same way they had dismantled my trust in silence. Their house, once the pride of their street, became a spectacle. Neighbors watched as a truck from the bank pulled into the driveway to inventory assets. The mortgage had been tied to falsified documents. The property was seized within days. Mom's garden, the one she always boasted about, now wilted behind a fence marked with foreclosure signs. When I heard about it, I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. They had built their lives on borrowed names, and now everything under those names had collapsed. Lydia was the next to fall. Her company discovered irregularities in the loan transactions that linked to her name through shared contact information. The HR department investigated quietly but thoroughly. When they found her connection to Elaine's accounts, she was dismissed immediately. The same sister who once told me, "You'll be fine," was suddenly the one calling in tears, saying she had lost everything. I didn't answer. I couldn't. One evening, as I was putting the baby to sleep, my phone rang. The caller ID read Mom. For a long moment, I just stared at it, unsure whether to pick up. Then I did. Her voice came sharp, trembling with rage more than regret. "You ruined this family," she said. "Everything we did was for you, for your future." I let her words hang in the air. Then I spoke calm and steady. "No, Mom, you did." The silence that followed was deeper than any argument we ever had. I heard her breathing uneven and quick. Then the line went dead. After that call, I packed what little I owned. The apartment I rented in Springfield was small, but it was mine. No hidden strings, no borrowed signatures, no guilt attached to the keys in my hand. The walls were bare, but the quiet felt honest. Each day I built small routines, morning walks with the stroller coffee by the window, the steady rhythm of work emails as I freelanced from home. There was peace in ordinary things, something I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, an envelope arrived from the bank. My heart raced as I opened it, half afraid it would be another problem. Instead, the letter was brief but powerful. It confirmed that my name had been cleared from all fraudulent accounts and loans. My record was clean. The relief that washed over me was unlike any victory I had known. I sat on the couch holding the paper, the baby babbling beside me, unaware of the war that had just ended. Looking out the window at the quiet Springfield street, I realized that justice didn't always come through revenge or apology. Sometimes it came through truth written plainly in black ink with no one left to deny it. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer, and turned toward my son. "We're free now," I whispered. He smiled in his sleep, and for the first time in a long time I did too. Evenings in Springfield had become my favorite part of the day. After dinner, I would sit by the small window with the baby monitor beside me and watch the last light fade across the rooftops. The chaos that once ruled my life was gone, replaced by a peace so gentle it almost scared me. Lucas, nearly 8 months old now, slept soundly in his crib, his tiny hands curled against the blanket. Sometimes I just sat there, watching him breathe, realizing peace doesn't arrive with noise or victory. It slips in quietly like a guest who has waited patiently to be invited. Robert visited every few weeks, always bringing a toy or book for Lucas. He never stayed long, but his presence filled the space with something solid and kind. Over coffee, he would ask about my work, about the baby, about how I was holding up. His visits reminded me that family could be more than blood. One afternoon, as Lucas gnawed on a wooden rattle, Robert smiled and said, "He's got your stubbornness." I laughed, realizing how long it had been since I'd allowed myself to feel light. Sometimes Mrs. Peterson from down the hall came by with cookies or gentle advice wrapped in kindness. One Sunday, while helping me hang a curtain, she said, "You're stronger than you think." I didn't answer, but the words stayed with me. Strength wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about standing still and refusing to reopen wounds just to prove they were real. A few weeks later, I saw an email from my mother. The subject read, "I'm sorry." For a long time, I stared at it, my pulse steady but cold. I never opened it. Some apologies arrived too late to matter. Forgiveness, I had learned, is an ode. Silence is its own kind of answer. That night, I pulled out my old journal and turned to the last blank page. I wrote slowly, "Peace isn't forgiveness. It's distance." When I closed the book, I felt a stillness I hadn't known in years. As the sun began to set, I walked to the front door and looked out at the quiet street. Golden light brushed the buildings, soft and forgiving. I listened to the hum of traffic, to the faint laughter of children nearby, to the rhythm of a life I had rebuilt with my own hands. Then I closed the door gently but firmly, knowing that this time it would stay that way. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. My story reminds us that family is not about shared blood, but shared respect. When trust is broken, silence can be the loudest answer, and walking away can be the most powerful way to heal. It isn't weakness to protect your peace. It's wisdom. Healing doesn't always mean returning to the people who hurt you. It often means learning to live without needing their approval at all. Thank you for staying until the end. If my story touched your heart, share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to choose peace over family or walk away to protect your own sanity? Your words might give someone else the courage to do the same. I read every message, and your stories mean more than you know. None of us heal alone. We heal by being understood.